This is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 164, about Luke Cage, season 2, episode 8. If it ain't rough, it ain't right.
You think I'm holding back? You think I'm holding back? I'm out to save you.
Welcome back, fellow Defenders, to episode 8 of Luke Cage, season 2. If it ain't rough, it ain't right. Yes, this is Defenders TV Podcast, episode 164, and I am one of your hosts, John.
I'm one of your hosts, Chris.
And running at the group, I'm Derek. Welcome back, everybody.
Yes, welcome back indeed to this, another really solid episode of Luke Cage. I must say, I really enjoyed this one, not to give any spoilers with regards to my rating coming up, but yeah, really enjoyed this. We will be providing our spoiler-filled review, of course, of all things Luke Cage, episode 8.
Yes, and you can get everything that is Defenders TV Podcast, all of our back issues, everything that we've done, including the MCU and all the Netflix in between, over at DefendersTVPodcast.com. And don't forget, give us a bit of a like and a share and a follow over at all your podcast catchers, as well as Apple Podcasts. This episode is brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium and Wolverine the Long Night, but we'll tell you a bit more of that later.
Absolutely. Just a reminder, we are on Google Podcasts, which has now released its official podcasts app quite recently. So if you're on all your Apple stuff, you have Apple Podcasts, and if you're on Google, you have Google Podcasts. It's a really easy way to get podcasts. I'm really enjoying it now, I must say. Well done, Google.
Well, swiftly moving on, I think. Derek, what are some of the episode details?
Well, this episode was written by Nathan Louis Jackson. He wrote Suckers Need Bodyguards, which was the 6th episode of season 1 of Luke Cage, so back again for season 2, like a lot of the writers in this team. He also recently wrote an episode of 13 Reasons Why.
Season 1 or season 2?
Season 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
As you can all tell, we are massive fans of 13 Reasons Why.
Another binge-worthy season from Netflix, once again, for 13 Reasons Why. I think we watched the entire thing in a weekend.
Yes.
Just because we weren't podcasting about it, which is so great about Netflix, to be able to watch an entire show, binge it in a weekend, and then just move on. We don't do that on Defenders TV Podcast. We watch all of these episodes individually. So
Good to know. I will add it to my ever-growing, ever-expanding backlog of things to watch on Netflix.
There you go. There you go. And this episode was directed by Neema Barnette. She's been working since the early 90s in TV to things like The Cosby Show back in the day, and has been working all the way up right through to Luke Cage this season. Done things like Blind Spot recently as well. So really cool to have her on board, and definitely got a good director's touch in this episode. Some great moments in here. John, do you want to tell us what that gave us with your synopsis for the episode?
Sure. In their own ways, Shades, Mariah, Tilda, Misty, and Luke begin to process the events of the previous night in Harlem. With Misty now at the helm due to a bureaucratic oversight, she leads the investigation to uncover the truth behind the murder of Ridenhour and Comanche and the attempt on the lives of Mariah and Tilda. However, her questioning of Shades and the search warrant for Harlem's paradise both lead to dead ends despite her suspicions. Elsewhere, as Bushmaster learns that Luke saved Mariah Stokes, he becomes incensed and sends his men after them and their loved ones, and at the same time plans to increase his strength with more nightshade. As Mariah and Tilda go on the run from Bushmaster's men, they are shot at outside the police precinct and then again at Mother's Touch. At the same time, Bushmaster's men go after Luke's father, but he arrives to protect him just in time. With the net closing in on Mariah, Tilda, and James Lucas, Luke turns to Danny Rand for help.
Ooh, so excited.
I know, it was really good. Danny, Danny, Danny boy.
Danny Rand is definitely coming to Luke Cage. Still not here, episode 8, but we knew he wasn't coming until the latter part of the season, but we know he's coming soon, which is pretty awesome.
Without further ado, on to our bullet points, or should I say bulletproof points. Bullet point 1, Luke gets the truth from Tilda. Yeah, really interesting this. I think just quickly from the outset as well, you know, the interactions in this episode were superb, and there were so many. Those kind of one-on-one interactions. I must say, I really love that about this episode. But on to Luke and Tilda. Derek.
Yes, we saw at the end of the last episode, Luke save Mariah and Tilda from the burning brownstone at the end of the episode, and then Mariah extending her hand to purchase his service or hire him for a while, as probably more likely with the hero for hire. But we see that he actually saved Mariah because he wanted to find out why Bushmaster hates her more than he does, which I love. That's a nice little line in there. But he goes to work on Tilda and starts getting some pretty good information out of her. I think it's quite cool that obviously he does refer to something we spoke about back at their first meeting, that Tilda's holding back information from Luke all the time during that first meeting. She doesn't tell him anything about Bushmaster, despite the fact that she has seen him on the TV beating up Luke Cage, and he's been in the store. Luke calls her out in that. He knows that she has actually had dealings with Bushmaster, which is pretty cool. And she's also had this run-in with him in the brownstone. So she reveals that he has powers that are different to Luke Cage. He does reveal that bullets hit him and they don't seem to hurt him, but they don't bounce off. So there is a difference in their power. And that's part of the reason we'll probably talk about it a little bit later on. It's part of the reason why we see Bushmaster is starting to get more and more sick and more hurt, because he's not recovering in the same way that Luke does, because Luke doesn't need to recover from bullet wounds because he doesn't get wounded. He doesn't get hurt by them at all, whereas Bushmaster seems to get hurt by them. So some really nice information in here.
Yeah, I really like the idea that Tilda was kind of really inquisitive about Luke's powers and saying, well, maybe acid would kind of burn away at the skin or something. That, all these goons that Bushmaster's throwing at Luke with these guns that make no impact whatsoever. And Tilda's kind of there, she's medical scientist, she's a herbalist, really just kind of inquiring as to maybe acid would work on this bulletproof skin. So really interesting kind of point of inquisition, I think, from Tilda here.
Yeah, it sounded like she was actually thinking of a way to hurt him. You see it in Luke's face where he's kind of going, hang on a second, that's not what you're supposed to be thinking. You're supposed to be helping me. I'm helping you.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the interactions, but I still can't, and I keep saying this until I'm proven wrong, I still can't shake the feeling that they're foreshadowing Tilda going to the dark side. Like, she's a supervillain trying to understand the weaknesses of a superhero. She holds back certain things. Just, there's a partial foreshadowing, and I'm sure maybe my own internal monologue is the one that's actually causing this foreshadowing. I'm seeing shadows where there is only light, but the way they play the character is just so pure. Like, she's pure when she talks to Mariah, and like they have that, even that interaction where Mariah comes in after being released slightly and goes into, and you have Luke, Tilda, and Mariah, and Mariah's making, let's say, uncouth, basically comments about how sexy Luke is, and things like that. And she wilts like she's a poor little girl. Like almost like I'm a little child. I shouldn't be hearing these things. I'm like, oh, you're playing it too far. You're a 20-something woman. Come on, you're a 21st century woman. You're better than this.
I think it's just to show the contrast between Mariah and Tilda. I think it's just having these two contrasting characters being side by side at all times really kind of shows off how bad Mariah is at times as well. There's some great moments in this episode. I think this is probably my favorite Alfre Woodard episode. I think she has some fantastic twists of phrase where she goes from being the kind of councilwoman Alfre Woodard character of Mariah to the complete opposite side. That grounded, street level, evil bitch that she can be sometimes comes out many times throughout this episode, and it's just great seeing the twist and turn, just in her turn of phrase to people when she wants to get back at them, like that when you're talking about when she just calls when she says Luke is such a gorgeous man or such a handsome man, that's why he's getting all the information out of you, Tilda, and then she retreats kind of going, actually my mom did tell me not to talk to anybody about this. Maybe I shouldn't be talking to Luke either.
Oh, I'm in a complete agreement with you. Like, Mariah in this, and I know we'll probably talk more about it later, but this is the Black Mariah escaping her cocoon episode, slowly digging away at, as she no longer minds, as you say, that she's shedding the skin of the councilwoman and more cracks are appearing, and that's where the street Mariah, the Black Mariah, is appearing. It was, I loved her in this as a whole separate thing. The final bit I just found interesting is Luke never really comes out and says it. This is Detective Cage to a degree, and we can probably understand now why I'm happy he's not a cop and he's not as forceful as Misty. It's a yin and yang approach here, where Misty is very like forward, but I was just at points going, just ask her. Just come out and ask her. She likes you. Just ask.
I think that's definitely another aspect of this. Yeah, Black Mariah, amazing in this episode, and equal with her was Misty Knight in terms of her attitude and how she was like absolutely going after these people. Really, really enjoys the moment where she goes, should have let that bitch burn to Luke. You know, Misty was really on fire in this, and I think Black Mariah, those sweeping ups and downs of who she is and what she is, as we'll explore in this podcast, it was just really, really good. I think as well, the one thing I definitely agree with Chris on Tilda is that she's always seems to be trying to scope people out, but without giving too much away about herself, whether that's with her estranged mum, with Black Mariah, always asking about the history and so on. Even with Luke back at Mother's Touch a few episodes ago, even with Bushmaster when he was coming in asking for his ingredients, she does appear to be kind of really almost a bit like a spy to some extent, or at least she's learning, she's trying to figure things out. For what ends, I don't know. And I think that's the other great thing really that kind of hit me with this episode, with so many one-on-one moments between individual characters, was you had this element of shifting loyalties, shifting motives, and you don't quite know where to place them, whether that be with Luke Cage. You know, what are his motives in protecting Black Mariah? Is it ultimately, is he trying to, you know, side with Bushmaster to go after Black Mariah, or side with Black Mariah to go after Bushmaster? And he's kind of a bit fluid here with what he's trying to do. But certainly, you know, at this moment in this episode, he is about trying to figure out Bushmaster. And I mean, he does, I suppose, in a sense, say it as well, about how, until Harlem is safe from Bushmaster, then she's on her own. But I just found it really interesting, all of these motives in this. But
I have this theory, and I'm committing expanding upon it upon each episode. Okay, imagine that they kill off Mariah Stokes. Thank you, John McIver, just for reminding us every episode.
Stokes.
She's the Stokes. Imagine they kill off Mariah, and then Tilda takes the moniker of Black Mariah. It would be a beautiful circle after Mariah killed Cottonmouth in the last season and took over the Empire and didn't actually do it. And what we see is Tilda take over. They kill off Mariah in towards the end of the season, and then the end is Tilda accepting that she is a Stokes, accepting who her piece is, what she's doing, and kind of then understanding where Auntie Mabel was from, what she was talking about, being like it's all for the good of the community, things like that. And then like that would be a beautiful evolution, like the literal turning of the innocent to the pure dark for what they think is, she thinks she'll be able to help more. They're making it so pure. If they make her dark, it will be amazing. But anyway, that's just it's a long theory I have now, but I'd be interesting to see.
Yeah, I still have seen nothing in the show that tells me that's going to happen, other than it will be a great twist because I'm not expecting it.
Exactly.
That's all. John, do you want to go on to the next bullet points?
But speaking of twists, bullet point 2, a lawyer's game. Yes, here we have Ben Donovan really playing the game, or playing as a checking account, basically. Really, really good at seeing all this base that Mariah had crumble for both her and for Shades as well. And I think, interestingly, more to the point, is that it's taken by Bushmaster, but in doing so, Misty uses it as a way of trying to get at Shades in the interview room. She puts it to Shades that he has been hung out to dry by Mariah because she has removed Ben Donovan from supporting him. Whereas we see later, away from Shades, that he is also effectively saying goodbye to Mariah as well, because Bushmaster has control. But it provides a really nice bit of tension between Shades and Mariah. And again, I think that moment in the burnt out brownstone, when you have Mariah and Shades, again, the motives suddenly become really unclear here, because on the one hand, you've had Mariah, as she's left the precinct, saying to Sugar, who's asked, are we waiting for Shade? She's like, no, as though he's forgotten.
Yeah.
And you have Shades thinking that she may have betrayed him by withholding Ben Donovan. But then in the brownstone, the burnt out shell of this house, they have this huge kind of fight. They really do clear the air in a sense, but whether it's fully cleared, whether the motives of Shades are really that loyal to Mariah, it is not clear. You know, he pulls out the gun that Mariah was looking for just before he arrived, or so we thought. He could have been out back. Again, what's the reason for that? Is he going to give it to Mariah, or is he going to possibly use it on her at some point as well? Because I think really what we see is that it's really shifting and unclear. 1 minute they're fighting, 1 minute they're falling out, 1 minute you then think they're pulling apart, and then all of a sudden they come back and it seems like they're working as this team, because then we do see Shades following Anansi, and you know, he really tries to sort of pull her around, shake her up to say, you know, you are this gangster, you boogie, you dust off your jacket, and you really get right back on the horse and claim what is yours back from Bushmaster. You go after what he prizes the most. You go after his loved ones, and really turns the tables to give her this kind of new focus. And I just thought that was amazing. And it all comes from Donovan effectively leaving them high and dry, both of them in the precinct.
Yeah, I have to say he's probably one of my favorite crossover characters in all of these Defenders shows, because he just shows up right at the most inappropriate or appropriate moment, just at those moments when they're about to crack the case and Donovan walks in and goes, what are you doing? My client could have been anywhere. Somebody else borrowed his car last night. You know, it's got that kind of stuff. And then the minute he's told there's no money involved in this from him, it's like, right, all right, I'm off to deal with my other new lead now with Bushmaster. As we see, he is also defending Bushmaster and has another great moment as Misty walks in and sees him defending Bushmaster in front of the SWAT team, and Misty just throws her eyes to heaven going, oh, not you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love Donovan. Green talks. It's just the way he put it. It's just like, you have no money. Well, fair point. It's like we wouldn't expect Foggy to work pro bono. Well, actually, probably Foggy we would expect to.
We would expect Foggy.
Exactly. Let's scrap that. Certain lawyers, the typical atypical lawyer stereotype, you don't expect them to do a lot of pro bono work.
Yeah, exactly. And Ben Donovan's definitely not one of those. As he says, I was never loyal to Mama Mabel. I was loyal to your money, and you don't have any. So, yeah.
I loved this Mariah Shades piece, I have to admit. Like, this, I'm with John, which is I don't fully trust Shades anymore in terms of it just seemed so well played, like, you're my queen. And it's like he's trying to build the Black Mariah, and I don't know if he's doing it out of love or if he wants to be king. So his whole piece of wanting to build her up, get everything together, and then knock her down. I just don't know. This is the first time we see Shades fully stand up to her. And he's like, no, it's all your fault. Because she's blaming everyone else. But then he brings back up Cottonmouth, and it's like, ever since that moment, you are the gangster. You need to give up this life of wanting to be legit. You are Mama Mabel 2.0.
I think that's partly because he's aligned himself with Mariah. So he is so closely aligned with her, has now lost most of his men's respect, as we talked about earlier on in the season. He's now got this big threat in Bushmaster who's going after Mariah and everybody that she's connected with. And if he doesn't put her back on that pedestal again, he's wasted. He's done as well. So everything he had was tied in with her. You see that moment when Mariah calls out, you know, we don't have the money to pay Donovan anymore. And Shades goes, hang on a second. What do you mean we? I told you not to do that. You did it. This is all your fault. Everything you've done is your fault. And then he kind of twists a little bit and shifts again and goes, actually, if we get back on side and you start going back against this and not trying to run away with all your money to upstate New York, then we're going to take it back together. You know, then we'll be together as long as you keep doing what I say to do. So there's definitely something changing in him, but it feels like he's actually saying, I need you again, Mariah. I need Mariah back on my side so that we can take down Bushmaster, because I can't do it alone. That's kind of the way. If you walk away, I have no support.
Yeah, I would like to see the king and queen. I'd like to see that, because at the moment we very much have the queen and her consort is Shades and that type of thing. They're not on equal footing. Mm-hmm. I'd very much like to see what Shades with power looks like. He has power now, and I don't think he is the man setting in motion the pieces. Mariah is telling him to jump. He then goes tell the guys to jump. I would be interested to see that, because one thing we never got, I'd love to see the Shades-Luke showdown. Like, if you imagine, it's almost like, imagine they build Shades to be the Bushmaster of season 3.
Interesting.
Like,
maybe.
he notices he's not powerful enough, or he gets taken down so much that he's like, okay, I need to be Luke Cage. He goes through experimentation. He goes through things like that, because that would be amazing, because they grew up in Seagate together.
Well, he's the cause of Luke getting his powers.
Exactly.
Luke and Comanche beat the crap out of him in Seagate, and that's why Luke went through the operation, I suppose, or went through the work that he had done in Seagate. So yeah, they're definitely connected. I'm just not too sure at this stage of the season. We're 8 episodes in, and only 13 in total, and I'm not too sure who's going to survive this season at the end. There's so much more to talk about with Shades, though, really, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. Moving on to, I think, bullet point 3, because yes, we have someone in the form of Comanche who certainly hasn't survived this season, but we see here that continued fallout from the revelation that they were lovers in prison to where there's the rejection of that relationship in the outside world by Shades to Comanche, but that affection and love still coming from Comanche towards Shades, where we then see the aftermath of that shooting by Shades. He visits Comanche's mum, as well as, the opening of this episode is him on the roof of a building, burning his gloves and some of his clothes to get rid of any of the evidence. Mm-hmm. So I like the fact that it continues in here. Even where, Misty is interrogating him, in the interview room, and she really does just get under his skin. You can see, that he's taking the questioning really hard, but he's got the pictures of Comanche there shot to bits. She talks about the second shot. I really like that they pulled that out, that, it was taken high, above Comanche with Ridenhour's gun. Ridenhour, no way could he have done that, given that he was killed instantly. And she just says, that finishing shot was from above, and it was by someone who was emotional, not thinking about how that evidence would play out and look after the forensics had got to it. Yeah. So, Shades was effectively acting emotionally here. He felt betrayed, I would think, in terms of Comanche being that snitch. And I find it then a really kind of nice contrast there that he then still visits Comanche's mum, or Darius's mum, as she certainly doesn't like the nickname Comanche.
No, not at all. This is totally testament to Theo Rossi's performance. We've talked about it quite a bit throughout this season, but these moments, even just that moment up on the rooftop where he's burning his gloves and thinking back on the times of Comanche, thinking back of things that he said to him in the past and kind of piecing together how all of this could have happened is what it feels like. It's all sold in silence from Theo Rossi up on this roof, just looking out over what's happened, trying to piece it all together, trying to realize why his friend turned on him, and then going to visit his mom and saying he's going to take care of her and make sure she's okay because he's respectful of the relationship that they've always had together. They've known each other since they were kids, and before he even spoke English, Comanche was his best friend. They're really touching moments between the two of them. And it does feel like he's about to break down and actually say something to her and tell her the truth and tell her what really happened. It's kind of just to get it off his chest. You know, we haven't really seen him in dealings with a mom figure or a father figure in the past. So seeing him with the mother of his best friend, who he's known since childhood, it does feel like he's about to break down and say, actually, I had to do it because Comanche is a snitch. And his mom sounds like she would never believe that, says that he would never be a person like that. It's a really interesting moment between the two of them. And then he reveals that there's nobody else in the world that would be grieving as much as him, except for her. So that's why they have the connection. But it just feels quite interesting having that discussion there.
I loved that scene on the roof. It was so powerful. Yeah. I've sung the praises of Theo Rossi throughout the 2 seasons, just of from the actor's portrayal of what he can actually do with shades on. Like, he's just so expressive when you can't even see his eyes.
Yeah, yeah.
So I find it really, really good. I didn't fully get and this is probably just me being dense, he puts the money down and he's like, Darius would want me to look after you. And I will. And even if you don't want me to. And I'm a bit like, oh, that's horrible foreshadowing. But anyway, I was kind of like, why? She knew Darius or Comanche was dirty. She knew, like, he was in a gang and things like that, and they were thick as thieves. So why would she mind taking money? Because Darius was looking after her anyway. That was just a comment. I was a bit like, oh, was a line skipped, or was something just, It just seems like something a piece was missing there where she was giving out, going, you did this, you're the reason my son's dead. It's all you and your dirty criminal work that caught that out. And we just don't get that part.
There's a little bit of it in that she says, she knows he's not telling the truth about what happened with Comanche. When he comes in, he doesn't finish the sentence. Yeah, I see what you mean. He does say to her, even if you don't want it, I'm going to take care of you. Right now, she's not particularly saying anything. It might just be commenting on her pride, because a lot of people don't expect someone to come in, a friend of a friend, and say, I'm going to take care of you, a friend of a son, and I'm going to take care of you, and I'm going to pay for everything. A lot of people don't expect that, and a lot of people wouldn't accept it. That just kind of, from a pride perspective, it might have just been a comment about that. But yeah, it's possible foreshadowing, but it felt reasonably straightforward for him to say that. And he was being pulled out of the room pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think as well, it's, Theo Rossi does kind of go on to say, I'm going to give the money to you anyway. I know you don't want it, but you know you need it. And it may be that she was getting money from Comanche, but she may not have done for the same reason as pride. Yeah. But he may have had to force it onto her. And I think it's just that moment of hearing that he's dead. She probably knew what he got up to. He's been in prison, so she knows that he's a bad guy. And even though she may disapprove of what he does, he's ultimately still her son. Yeah. And at that moment, she's probably thrashing out with Shades as one of his closest, oldest friends, saying, because you were both in it, that's why, and you're still alive, maybe. So it could have been those things. I think it was slightly unspoken, maybe, but certainly I think it kind of seemed very familiar with regards to the death of the kid in Defenders, when Luke Cage goes round, and he has said in prison just before, go to the biscuit tin on the sideboard, and he sees all that money rolled up because he knows his mum never goes there. But that mother still knows that he's up to no good.
Yeah.
So I think it felt a bit like that to me, I think.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I have one thing I wanted to point out, though. Did you notice that she had the plastic covers on her couches?
Yes,
I love that
did.
touch. I love that
I was
touch.
like, that reminds me of so many grannies, like my granny, and it was like, God help you if you sit on that couch. Like, you're like,
Yeah.
I do not want your sweaty ass anywhere near it. You were sitting on plastic.
Oh, and you will sweat if you sit on it because, wow. Yeah, that was so cool. I definitely thought that was cool. Can I also just say what another great bit of coolness was in this episode? Again, one of my favorite scenes was as Misty is interviewing Shades, her flashbacks here, where she's running through the murder of Ridenhour, and as she explains to Shades, effectively telling him that she knows that he did it. She's walking it through exactly as it played out, but as her. I loved the touch of the shades on her as well as she's doing it. What a great scene. And then just as it fades back into the interview room, I just thought that was a superb bit of filming here on this TV show. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think using something that we're so familiar with so far over the last 2 seasons, seeing how Misty puts together a crime scene, using that in this way where actually she's not at the crime scene. She's just using it to get at Shades and hopefully get him to twist and turn on Mariah and get all the information she needs out of it. I thought it was really good. And then just to have Ben Donovan in the room going, put down those glasses. They're very expensive. Don't want to hurt. Don't want to break those on my client. Speaking of which, we also get in this episode the origin story of Shades, which we've never actually had before. We get his real origin story as to why he's called Shades, because Comanche helped him when he was a kid rob a pair of Top Gun sunglasses. And then he wore those every day for a year until they broke. And that's how he got the name Shades. But just nice to have an origin story even for Shades.
I know, I was so hoping he'd be the flashback. Or that would be incorporated into the flashback episode or something. I was just like, oh, I want to see that. So I'm hoping we probably will, but I don't think it will. I think that is our flashback for Shades right now.
Exactly. We won't say baby Shades in his Top Gun sunglasses.
No, but speaking of Misty Knight, moving on to bullet point number 4, we get Police Chief Misty Knight. As Ridenhour has forgotten to turn in her resignation papers, and they were actually having a pool bet as to how long it would be until she gets back behind the desk. But this time, because of Ridenhour's death, she is the next most senior detective there. And so we see her as the chief of that precinct, orchestrating the investigations both into Bushmaster and as well into Mariah. I love the fact that, you know, in contrast to Ridenhour, she immediately pulls in Luke Cage and she wants to use him to sort of question Tilda, see what she can find out from Tilda about Mariah. And I think ultimately as well, just her anger with the murder of Ridenhour. You know, she calls him a sofa cat, a house cat. He shouldn't have been out there on the streets. I love that when she's questioning her about the shooting of Ridenhour, you know, she's talking about the snitch in Comanche. She's then says, it must have been your fawn Shades that's done it, you know, effectively to shield her. And she goes, as we all know, I hear cougars like to prey on fawns, you know, really riling her up. And then in relation to the burnt out brownstone, you know, she starts to question Mariah. Were these just thieves? You know, if it was, why did they try and burn you, go to that elaborate length? Why did they just not shoot you or bash your head in with a mic stand, referring to Cottonmouth and the murder of Cottonmouth by Mariah in season 1. So I really enjoyed Misty here. I love the fact that she had the wind in her sails and was kind of taking on the baddies of Harlem and taking over the leadership in the precinct.
Yeah, it really had that feeling of this is what Misty would be like if she was in charge. It really felt like, remember all those times that everybody told you couldn't do what you wanted to do? Now you can do it all because you're in charge. It was really good fun to see it. And what we find out actually is that Ridenhour chose not to file her paperwork because he knew she was coming back. He was only giving her 3 weeks, wasn't he? He was kind of giving her just, a bit of a holiday, and she'll realise, we have Bailey is saying about a week, and then we have Nandi who's saying, I knew you'd be back in about 3 days. And I think it is about that. It's only about a day or maybe two since Misty was actually in the office. So nice little touches there. I really like the reaction. I know we've talked about Mariah quite a bit here, but I really like the reaction from Mariah when she finds out that Ridenhour is dead. She didn't know at that point. And that's when Misty realizes she couldn't have killed him. But it's a really great reaction from her because she twists very quickly into protecting Tilda almost immediately after that moment. It's like as if, lost one of my best friends. This is really serious here. And kind of also lost the other bit of leverage that I have to get out of this situation because Ridenhour has been slightly soft on her in the past. He's been able to talk her around and talk her to do different things. So I wonder if there was just that little bit of a moment where Mariah, being the person that thinks on her feet quite a lot, just suddenly goes, that situation has changed. Pivot to something else really quickly that I need to sort out, which is Tilda and keeping Tilda safe.
Yeah, I love this. Chio, if you are listening, as I called this one, and my theories are slightly correct, I'm available for season 3 if you want a writing consultant. Just my theories apparently are on point to where you want to take things. I know probably Matt Owens and Nathan Lewis, kind of your two other big writers, were probably involved as well. So guys, if you listen, you know where to find us. I can we're on the same wavelength.
I think we're 3 out of 20 so far, Chris, on predictions. So
hey,
not sure yet. If any of the fellow defenders are keeping track of them, as we asked you to at the beginning of the season, I think we're around 3 out of 20 right now.
Yeah, that's still good odds. Come on. Okay, I'm still winning the belt here. I am the champ. I'm not a good champ. I'm still a champ. Yeah, look, I love this. I loved the fact that we could get Captain Misty, almost. And the more I kind of saw this episode, I saw it very much becoming the Commissioner Gordon of the Marvel Netflix universe, if you will. In that she won't have a bat signal, she'll have a defender signal. She'll nice. Be the go-between between the vigilantes, quote unquote, and the police force, because we get that fantastic scene where she asks Luke for help when obviously we're speaking around Tilda, and he goes, I'll do it my way, and she says yes. And yeah, I was exactly. That's the cool part, because what we can get then is we still get Daughters of the Dragon, okay? We will still get that, but it would just be Daughters of the Dragon when she moonlights as the side gig, as the detective. We won't get Detective Misty Knight, we get Captain Misty Knight, where she still has a date up, she's still looking after Harlem in this case, potentially with all eyes on her. And what we do see is, I think it's Nandi who calls out, and I think Bailey as well, which is, why aren't we getting all the police chiefs here? Like, why isn't this being overrun? And it's because they're afraid of the blowback of another scarf. Obviously, from the fact that Ridenhour is now dead with a snitch, and he may have been dirty. Obviously he's not, we know that. But the optics. And I can see, we already know that Misty is there, Saving Private Ryan. It's called out at the beginning. So if this all goes well, which potentially probably won't, being the show that it is for her, but like, she could get like, okay, you get a special unit. You're Captain Misty Knight, and the Harlem PD have a special unit, kind of. That I think I like the idea, because that's probably how you would deal with it in the real world. If you start getting all these superpowered individuals, like, you build a task force to work with them to a degree. I did really also like that, as you called out, that scene where she's being Shades in the interview scene. Like, that's her superpower, and just seeing her do that. I did love the choice of the director made, which was putting it directly, Shades at a table in the scene. Not kind of splitting it or anything like that. It was a nice touch.
It's so cool, isn't it? And they're the kind of making of moments I want to know about. When you're doing a show like this, when you're making all 13 episodes before they get released, these kind of scenes that they do where they're revisiting a scene that was done by a completely different director in a previous episode, and new directors coming in and directing this episode. Does the old director direct that bit at the same time in the same day, so the location's all right? Or does this director just come back in and do it themselves? There's continuity people, of course. But do you set back up the whole scene again when this other director comes on board? You know, it's
Well,
kind of
I'd say
interesting.
they would time it so that then the next day, because it was at night, that it would be the new director, possibly, or something like that. They would try and get the timing right. Because the one thing I was always just seeing that transition from when they were outside to when they're back in the interview room. And again, it was nicely done where you have Shades, as you say, Chris, at the table in that set or in that location. You can see the wind going through Misty's hair. And then it just goes in close and then pulls back, and it goes in close, and there's that kind of black background, and then the interview room forms around her. I thought that was really, really nicely done. I think the other great thing I loved about Misty in this is when she's going into Harlem's Paradise with the search warrant, and I love her irreverence to Bushmaster. Just the use of his accents, the use of his dialogue, really, again, just absolutely picking at him, trying to rile him up. And to the point where once she's gone, you see him sort of fall back in the seat, whether that's to do with the nightshade withdrawals or the fact that Misty, in combination with that, has just been trying to rile him up and niggle. Yeah, exactly. But I love the fact as well that, again, Bushmaster comes back at her, where he talks about Babylon's finest as the cops show up and the detectives. But he does say, I don't need a gun, a badge, or a plastic arm. And that's one thing I would agree with Bushmaster on. He's certainly gotten Misty's arm down to a T. Hopefully the next prototype's on the way in, Danny Rand. I really hope so. But he says you can search Harlem's Paradise all you want, but you will know, as you know now, that I have the power and you have no power. So I thought that was really, really interesting. But possibly speaking of Bushmaster, should we move on to bullet point 5? Because Bushmaster is on the warpath.
He absolutely is. Yeah, this is huge. I've watched this episode 3 times waiting for our recording for this podcast. And every single time that Bushmaster is told that Luke Cage is alive and he saved Mariah and Tilda, that moment when he rips the chair apart in Harlem's Paradise gets me jumping every single time. It's just this huge crack, much better than Luke breaking the table when frustrated earlier on in the season, the conference table. This one just gets me to jump almost every time. It's quite a phenomenal scene. But yes, he is completely freaked out about this idea that now Luke is with Mariah and Tilda. I put $1 million on each of their heads.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
So audacious that the taxi cabs make a play outside the precinct, shooting it up, shooting at Mariah. Again, Mariah saved by Luke Cage, but I think, is it Nandi or Misty? One of them says, if they're openly shooting at the precinct, then who knows what's going to happen? We're certainly not safe. I really like this kind of, running from danger, this sort of on the run feel that Mariah and Tilda have, and even with Luke Cage, it feels like they're all on the run away from Bushmaster. And I think what makes it even more so good is certainly for Mariah, just because she has nothing left. You really feel as though she has been, thrown to the sharks, really. Here. I really, really enjoyed that.
And also, interestingly, he does put a price on not only their heads, but the head of all of their loved ones. So kind of interesting, because obviously that's the reason why all of Luke's friends and family have been kind of cutting down as the season has gone on. We've lost everybody. So the only person in danger is his father at this stage. So luckily everybody got out of town, right?
Nearly everyone. I still think Claire's going to pop up in again in another episode or 2. I'm hoping.
It'd be nice, but I think she left the country, I think is what they said. And this is still within the same week or so of the beginning of the series. So I'm not sure whether she's going to be back.
That's a long week. It must feel like at least a season and a bit for Luke.
It must feel like an eternity, yeah.
I loved what we do get this, which is the scene in the church, where we do see Luke sitting there listening to the sermon. Strange that they chose to do so much on the baptism part, but I'm just like, okay. Obviously, they were just setting it up.
I think his father calls out the reason for that. He says, this guy may be a grown guy, but remember, Jesus wasn't christened until he was 30. You can always return to the church. So I think that's him once again using his sermons to speak directly to Luke Cage, going, you may have turned away from the church and you may be a grown man, but you can come back. You can always come back. They've done this really well throughout the season. I'm generally not one for using actual sermons in shows to illustrate your point. But they've done it really well. They've layered it over very well. The sermon that was being told while Bushmaster, was on the other side getting angry and setting things up, with Anansi and Luke sitting there listening in to his father's sermon. It actually worked really well this time. You could really see where they were going for.
Yeah. The biggest part of this scene that I really enjoyed was actually just seeing James kind of throw that punch and being so aggressive to the guy who came after him.
Me too.
And then just seeing Luke's smile.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That was the connection point. I was like, oh, now they care about it. Like, that was the you can actually see it in the actor's face. That I was just like, that's really, really nice.
Yeah, it's so good. I think James as well, I think he says, you can't be shooting my baby. Like, really, really cool little scene that I completely agree.
And isn't it amazing when we talked about them having that moment that was kind of cut off a bit short in the last episode, when the two of them had that kind of heart to heart. And we were expecting they needed another big heart to heart. They didn't really. They just needed a scene like this to show you that they're now united and they're now much closer than they ever have been. It's really good when a good director and a good writer get together to just put together a simple scene that tells you everything you need to know. And when the actors are as good as these guys, all good.
Yeah, definitely.
100%. I'm just like, actually, Gio, if you're listening, I'm sorry. I'm not good enough to be in your writer room. You guys completely outdid yourself with that. It was just like, within, 30 seconds, it was all resolved, and I would have done, a 3-minute monologue? Yeah, I know.
I think the other, just speaking of heart-to-hearts as well, I really enjoyed Anansi's kind of heart-to-heart with Bushmaster here as well. You know, he fears for the darkness that's consuming him, the nightshade that's destroying him. Again, there's another nice reference to this kind of more earthy magic that really does take a toll. You know, it's very different from the kind of magic associated obviously with Doctor Strange and Iron Fist, but also, to some extent, at least in terms of the technological idea of it, Wakanda, as well as even with Thor. So I really like this earthiness to it. I love that, this has real sort of degrading consequences that Anansi is seeing in Bushmaster, the price that he's having to pay to effectively make himself at home in Harlem's paradise, and really crush Mariah. He makes that reference to Bushmaster's mom, and that's the reason why he's doing all this, is that she'll like what you've got, but not how you got it. This really kind of wise uncle of his saying that. And again, be careful what you do unto others, because obviously we later see Shades putting on his shades, probably about to sort of track and follow Anansi as he leaves from Harlem to go back to Gwen's restaurant. So I really enjoyed that moment with Anansi and Bushmaster.
Yeah, absolutely. Once again, if you haven't learned anything from our 20-odd Doctor Strange podcasts at this stage, what's the phrase, John? Magic has a price, and that's what Anansi is calling out here about the use of this magic with Bushmaster. Really weirdly, I don't know whether you can see my notes, John. Specifically on my notes, I call out the fact that this herb is quite similar to Black Panther, because they do have the heart-shaped herb in Black Panther, which bestows the eater of it with some special powers and to become the Black Panther and the strength. So in this episode, when they're talking about the herb Nightshade coming from the Blue Mountain, which is a mountain in Jamaica near Kingston, which is where Bushmaster's from. I actually was just thinking of it going, oh, this is a plant that can only grow in one place and imbue special powers, just like heart-shaped herb from Wakanda. So I know what you mean. It's not the technology of Wakanda.
I meant it more the technology, you know, that they're not creating spaceships, all that kind of stuff from the vibranium. And it's the vibranium that imbues this heart-shaped flower. I think the interesting thing is that rather than it coming from space, and that is why this flower is imbued with the power of vibranium, which gives Black Panther his power in turn. Anansi makes it, you only get that soil on the Blue Mountain in Jamaica. Yeah. That's what makes the nightshade from the special. He's trying to grow it as ganja, and he says this isn't science. So, but it's more the technological aspect of how Wakanda uses that, and how, say, Thor would view his magic. It is science that's just not understood on Earth yet. Yeah,
exactly. Some other really interesting stuff here from Bushmaster as well. You kind of mentioned earlier on, John, about Nandi saying that they attacked the police precinct, they're going to attack it again. They also go one worse for a lot of people. They attack inside a church while a sermon's going on in the church. That's supposed to be sacrosanct. It is supposed to be that thing that is left out of any kind of gang warfare. It's very rare you'll see that a church is being attacked like this. So it does feel like, even though Luke is there with his father and protecting him, it is kind of like, well, Luke is just paying attention to his father's sermon, and once the sermon's over, then he will go into hiding with his father. But they attack the sermon, which is as bad as, attacking outside the police precinct. These guys are willing to stop at nothing to get their prey, which is another testament to the people that are surrounding Bushmaster as well.
Yeah, I'm wondering, based on what we see at the end, is what he's going to do. Is he going to end up supersizing something that's going to give him loads of extra strength, but give him a finite period of time? Is he going to overdose on the steroids? And also, I'm really curious on the background of Anansi. Is he the medicine man, or did he previously use nightshade? I'd love that, if he gets shot and we just see the bullet not stop, or the bullet go into him, but similar to Bushmaster. He's speaking to experience. So he was an addict of nightshade. It's completely warped his mind, and he had to fight back like an addict to kind of, I think that would be a really nice story, which is this stuff is great, but it's a drug, and I'm here, I'm your sponsor almost. I think that would be a nice piece. I'd love to see more about that relationship. I'm not sure we will, because it's a bit late in the season, but I do think it would be interesting to see why he knows so much about it. Is he, and John, don't squeak, is he the precursor to Brother Voodoo? Yes, there is an Anansi in the Marvel universe, but it's Spider-Man, Spider-God thing related, nothing to do with this. So I'm curious if they basically co-opted a Brother Voodoo-like villain or supporting character and kind of made him this mystic herb-based kind of guy. I just think I want to know more about that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, certainly Anansi isn't really known with regards to Brother Voodoo, but certainly there's similar things going on here, and it could easily be one of Brother Voodoo's other, nemesis that is just co-opted into this with this name. Certainly. I mean, I love the fact as well that with this nightshade that you're starting to see that Tilda has told Mariah about it. Does Mariah see a weakness here that she can exploit, or a strength in using the nightshade for herself even, to go after, or protect herself from Bushmaster? I really like that. And I think hopefully they really keep this going, because I never expected it from this season. I really enjoyed seeing this kind of earthy magic at play here in this, the superstition, the ancestry, the history, the stories passed down from generation to generation, the recipes, and just how that's woven into this earthy magic in Harlem and in Luke Cage. It's been really, really good. I think as well, just with Mother's Touch being attacked, I definitely think that, Tilda has just probably whipped all her nightshade off from out of her store as it's being attacked by Bushmaster's men to try and get this nightshade.
Yeah, can you imagine, for following up, theory time with Chris, can you imagine? I need a new theme song, right? I think that could be we'll just insert theme song in here now. It's like, theory time, da-da-da-da, theory time. Can you imagine if we do see Black Mariah take the nightshade and go toe-to-toe with Luke Cage?
I think it's more likely to be what you said earlier on, Chris, that she gives it to Shades and Shades becomes the villain. That's exactly what you predicted earlier on. So I think that's most likely. If she does take the nightshade potion from Tilda, that she may pass it on to her enforcer rather than actually taking it herself. Although I do really like the idea of her creating herself to be bulletproof, not going toe-to-toe with anybody, not fighting with anybody, just making sure she can't be shot. That's a pretty good thing for any senator at all, but especially someone like Mariah.
Yeah, but it would be so reminiscent of the comics, because there's one scene in the comics just anytime I think of that, which is where it's Black Mariah jumping through the ceiling, attacking Luke Cage. It's kind of the shot they use for a lot of the Wikipedias when you kind of look for Black Mariah. And I'm like, oh my god, can you imagine Alfre Woodard like just smashing through a wall? It would just be like, especially when she goes that kind of, she's completely lost her senator, kind of the councilwoman kind of facade, just kind of coming in, kind of like, bring it on, Luke. Anyway.
Well, speaking of Mariah, just one final point that kind of fits in here as well. We do find a little bit more out about her past with Tilda. So we find out that she was taken away from her at birth. So she hadn't actually spent any time with Tilda at all. So we didn't really know that throughout the season. We hear that Mama Mabel had actually passed Tilda on to the Johnsons, the cousins of Mariah, right? So there hadn't been any real connection between Tilda at all and Mariah. Which is quite interesting. That's very different to what we thought would happen.
And you're just wondering, why is that? Is it because obviously, with Mariah being in a crime family, that she's got other things to do, but also in season 1, we do have that flashback to Mama Mabel, and to, Mariah as well. Maybe there's something in that is part of the reason why Tilda is given to the Johnsons, that it's an underage relationship, out of marriage relationship that ultimately, has been adopted out in the family, so to speak. You do get this idea that the Johnsons, Mama Johnson has always said to Tilda, this is your mama though, with the picture of Mariah there. So this was a nice little bit of context to Tilda. And with also finding out the surname to Tilda Johnson, that there are some possibilities here, as Tilda Johnson is the alter ego name for Nightshade, which is a Luke Cage character as well, not connected to Mariah, Black Mariah, but ultimately, this could play out within the rest of the season as well.
Yeah, possibly. Tilda Johnson was also a character that became a hero as well. So there are two sides to the character. She was a villain called Nightshade, which is why we're hearing a lot about Nightshade from Tilda throughout this season. But it may be that she will go the hero's path without actually going anywhere near the villain's path. So I'm still on the fence about whether she'll be a hero or a villain. Yeah. At the moment, I think she's absolutely just going to be the innocent character and will carry on the rest of the season. Now, they've just taken that Dr. Nightshade character and created this as the Tilda Johnson of this show.
Yeah, and she's worked with, in her good incarnation, she's worked with Misty Knight.
Yeah.
So there's some nice connections here potentially that could form with Tilda for good or for evil or for innocence that may happen. So really interesting stuff coming up. But again, we were talking about smashing through walls. Another person that can smash through a wall with a really big, bright, glowing fist. Even though we didn't see him, we get his name dropped by Luke Cage after Mother's touch has been attacked. Should they go back to the precinct? No, that's been attacked. What do we do? If no one else can help, who do you call? But multi-billion-dollar friend, philanthropist, pharmaceutical company owner, Danny Rand, to see what he can do. So yes, I have to say I did squeal a little with his name being mentioned. I wanted him to at least be mentioned, which is great. We've had that already. The anticipation of Luke Cage and Danny Rand forming up together to make beautiful Heroes for Hire is just there. It's just out of reach. I can sense episode 9 really coming up. So I can't wait to finish this episode and get onto episode 9.
Well, I think that's it for our top 5 bullet points, guys, yeah?
It is from my side.
Me too.
So, the big notes, I suppose, for this episode. One for me, Misty and Nandy having a chat in Ridenhour's office. Nice little reference here, considering the other show they're speaking about is only just on the air. Nandy says to Misty that, she says, Callahan is Maui and O'Reilly has moved to New Orleans. This is a reference to Bridget O'Reilly, who's a police officer who, in the current series of Cloak and Dagger, which is only on episode 5, she is the main police officer seen in that show. So kind of cool that they're referencing this show. And apparently, because we're not up to date on Cloak and Dagger, but I did check it out with their friends over at the Cloak and Dagger podcast. Go listen to them. They're doing a great coverage of Cloak and Dagger. Did check it out. Apparently, they have actually referenced back to it. So we've had Bridget O'Reilly also confirm that she's from Harlem PD, so that she has in fact worked in the past with Misty. So that's quite cool that they're tying those shows in together in a little way as well. It wasn't to be expected.
No, I'd love to see in the future, and I know I'm going because they're two different networks and everything like that, but some form of crossover, similar to what we got with Sony and Marvel with Spider-Man. Just like, hey, let's play ball. We're all one big happy family. It's just, you can get Luke Cage for one episode and we can get Cloak and Dagger for an episode type of thing.
That would be cool. And they're all made by ABC at the end of the day. They're all made by the same TV company. I think they've always just said about any crossover with the Defenders and the other TV shows is that they're definitely aimed at a different audience. It was the same reason why we didn't have the Defenders character in the Lego Marvel games, for example. Their versions of the characters were not in those games because it would advertise to kids, you should be watching this show, which they absolutely should not be watching. For us, it would be great if we saw Cloak and Dagger over on Luke Cage, make us watch those shows. But if you do it the other way around, possibly you're encouraging people to watch shows they shouldn't be watching at all because they're a bit more violent.
That is true. That is true.
Yeah. And it's just another subscription service to sign up to.
But it's really good.
Renting
really
out TV.
Yeah, absolutely. Really enjoying it, though. As I say, go over and check out the Cloak and Dagger podcast, a member of the collective. So another good podcast about good TV shows. One other little catch, because I remember people asking about this before, and we've forgotten to mention it, because everybody thinks this is a really big in-joke or a Marvel reference. The coffee cups that are in the police station, you will really recognize these. These are the Anthora coffee cups. They are basically just coffee cups that are used on pretty much every New York set TV show. Everybody seems to think because they watch all the Defenders and they're looking for Easter eggs everywhere that they're connected to specifically Marvel Defenders, but they've been around since things like Seinfeld and Friends and that kind of stuff. Any show based in New York has to show them at some time during their shows. So that's where they're from. Yeah,
tasty coffee that doesn't actually exist in real life.
It does. No, it does.
It does?
It does, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Excellent. Well, I've just got one note, which Shades mentions the Rivals. We Ain't Got None. This is a reference to his gang from season 1 of Luke Cage, which had Comanche in, Romeo, which we get the flashback in this episode being killed by Shades, and of course Shades himself involved together. And in the comics, the Rivals were a gang that Carl Lucas, obviously Luke Cage, and Willis Stryker ran.
Yes, not a gang, the gang.
That's right,
that
the
they
gang.
Ran. Yes, that's the one that caused all of the problems between Carl Lucas and Willis Stryker, leading to Luke Cage. So very cool. Also, can I reference your little comment from earlier on about Tilda? Tilda Johnson has also run the Rivals as well. So they're quite a big gang. And I just can't remember whether we even mentioned it in season 1. I had to just look it up because it's the way Shade says it. It looks like a quote from a song. And I couldn't find any quote from a song. And then I was going, the Rivals. I remember them. Oh yeah, that's the gang. So I had to mention it.
Excellent stuff. So loads of connections here.
And speaking of connections, where we have not seen one, is our friendly neighborhood Mr. Stan Lee. Mm-hmm. We are episode 8 and we've still yet to get our cameo.
Yes, that's right.
Just wanted to point that out in case anyone thought they missed it. No, we still have not seen it. I'm keeping an eagle-eyed view out, so hopefully in the coming episodes we'll get it. Officer Lee will be somewhere, because I've been literally reading every post-it note on the back of, and every time we see a cop, they're in the police station. I'm just like, is that no? Oh, no. Is that no? So it's just quite strange that I haven't seen much yet.
Well, the good news is that back in Jessica Jones season 2, it was episode 13 on the back of a bus as for Bushman, wasn't it? Back in Jessica Jones. So hopefully we'll get an appearance from Stan Lee towards the end of the season.
Yes, I'm absolutely sure we will. But with that, chaps, on to our defend of Luke Cage episode 8. If it ain't rough, it ain't right. Chris, do you defend episode 8?
I do defend episode 8. It is slightly rough, but it is 100% right. being very honest, they're giving us a lot of the beats that we want, the explanations we want, but it's taking longer than I would want. And I was thinking about this, and I've been mulling it over. Would the show benefit from a shorter season?
Nope.
There you go. There, my question is answered. Congratulations. Thank you so much, Derek.
No problem.
I feel potentially they could have squeezed some of this episode and some of the probably earlier storylines just slightly more together. I like what we're getting. I like where the show is going. I have a lot of questions. I'm getting answers on an episode by episode basis. So it still has my attention, but it does feel slightly a slower burn than some of the previous episodes.
Wait till Danny Rand comes in.
Yes, him and his glowing pinky will light everything up.
That's me. I have the glowing pinky. He has the glowing fist.
Right. There we are. So just in summary, yes, look, I am enjoying it. I still do defend this episode, this season. It is just it's slightly slow for me at the moment. I kind of wanted to pick up the pace a bit, cause I want to see the Luke Cage Bushmaster confrontation. I want to see that again. I want to see the culmination of all these storylines. So yes, I do defend, but, they, much like the Thora coffee cups, I want them to take a bit of coffee and kind of get energized and caffeine fueled and run to the finish line. John, do you defend this episode of Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 8? If it ain't rough, it ain't right.
I do defend this episode. I give it 4.5 Black Mariah Boogies out of 5. Yes. This was, I think, one of my favorite episodes of, the season. Mm-hmm. I absolutely loved all the interactions on a one-to-one, with all these characters, kind of confined within the precinct, then confined within, Mother's Touch, confined within Harlem's Paradise, and confined within themselves for some people like Shades. I really, really enjoyed it. And I thought it was all about these character interactions, these one-on-one conversations, and I absolutely loved the shifting intrigue, motives, and loyalties that all this one-on-one interaction with these characters kind of gave me. I really was thought about the show in such a large way in this episode because of these one-to-one character stories that were going on and how they wove into the overall story arc. I love the fact that even Luke Cage, he's been using Bushmaster up till now to kind of try and take down Mariah, make her feel uncomfortable. He's not necessarily seen him as the one to go after, yet in this one, he uses Mariah to take down Bushmaster. He's protecting her so that he draws him in, and that Misty and him as well, then working together, can take down Bushmaster, and then they try and take down Mariah. I love the fact that with Mariah and Shades, what is Shades' endgame? And indeed, what's Mariah's? Because this blows hot and cold a bit between these two, yet they're still there, seemingly working together. But I'm just not too sure. The loyalty, where is it? And again, maybe this is something to do with Comanche that plays into Shades now here, and especially given his position. But he certainly still seems to be on her side. And even with Tilda and Mariah, they kind of blow hot and cold a bit, these two, that, they want to be together and then they don't. They want to be together and then they don't. Tilda has a problem with what Mariah Stokes does, but then wants to learn more. I find, what's the purpose here for Tilda, and indeed for Mariah, now keeping her on almost past her sell-by date, in that she hadn't really contacted her at all, and it was to open up, family first and that program. So all these loyalties, motives seem to be shifting to me constantly, and I really, really enjoyed that. And I think to me at the center of this was not only Black Mariah, but Misty Knight, with just such great sarcasm in this episode. It really involved a superb episode for Misty Knight along with Mariah Dillard. Absolutely loved it. I also just want to say as well, I do think maybe last week's episode I judged a little harshly. In retrospect, I may have a 4 out of 5, but I think the niggles that got me possibly just weighed a bit more on my review at the time, but certainly it was a good episode. Mm-hmm. But moving on from my failings as a podcast reviewer, Derek, do you defend this episode of Luke Cage?
I thought you were going to ask if I was going to fail as a podcast reviewer there.
Never.
I think I mentioned at the end of episode 7 review that it felt like the end of a mid-season finale. And this episode really felt like the start of the next season. I question whether they were actually going to break this show into 2, whether they were going to break it into 7 episodes and then 6 episodes and be released at later times of the year, just to kind of spread it out a bit. I do feel that these shows get a really short shrift from people. They sometimes watch 2 episodes and then don't come back to it for months. So I still, of that old school of people that don't really binge watch a huge amount of shows, I still have that feeling sometimes that maybe they should break these up and just spread them out over a longer period of time so people don't get burnt out trying to watch a 13-hour movie. But when it's of this quality, it's excellent. I love when you have these characters sitting down with each other and having moments together. I come from obviously a history of talking about 22 episode TV shows per season. So you're talking 5 seasons with over 100 episodes of just one show about one character. So I can absolutely stand 13 episodes of these characters being side by side. This episode particularly, standout performances, as you said, John, from Misty, and as you said, Chris, from Theo Rossi, as I said, from Alfre Woodard, as Mariah Dillard. They all just had great performances in this episode. So much stuff for them to deal with, and definitely a high point of the season for me. Really, really enjoying it.
Excellent.
Fantastic. And gentlemen, I think it's time we move on to our feedback. But before we do, I just wanted to remind our listeners that this episode is brought to you in part by Stitcher Premium and Wolverine the Long Night. For those of you who don't know what this is, where have you been? Living under a rock or in Canada? Much like our Canadian hairy friend, the Wolverine. And the Wolverine Long Night is actually really good. It's a scripted podcast from Marvel themselves. And it's just a really good narrated story with some great sound effects. It stars none other than Richard Armitage as the titular hero himself. There's 10 episodes for you to go listen to right now, exclusively on Stitcher Premium. Go over to stitcher.com/premium and use the promo code DEFENDERS. And you know what? You get 1 month free straight away. And in that 1 month, you can binge 10 fantastic episodes of it straight away. And you know what? The more you listen to it, the more they'll produce. Who knows? Will we get X-Force? Will we get Alpha Flight? Will we get Deadpool? Come on. Who doesn't want to hear Ryan Reynolds narrate a Deadpool podcast? Probably never going to happen, but it would be amazing.
Yeah, it'd be cool.
And just a short FYI, the code can be used up until September 2018. So get your rockets on. But anyway, gentlemen, let's move over to our feedback.
Yes, remember, fellow defenders, you can send in feedback through our voicemail over on defenderstvpodcast.com. You can also send us email through feedback@defenderstvpodcast.com. And of course, please join the community on Defenders TV Podcast on Facebook. You can join our group over at facebook.com/groups/Defenders TV Podcast, where we have tons of spoiler posts, comments, discussions, all about Luke Cage on Marvel Netflix. But our first bit of feedback comes over the airwaves through voicemail from Ryan, one on episode 5 and one on episode 6. The first one here is for episode 5.
Hey, what's up, guys? It's Ryan here with my episode 5 review. Loved this super fan. All over this. Loved it. Loved Piranha being the biggest super fan ever. Loved the fact that Luke Cage tells him at the end, you want to hire this hero? The price just tripled or doubled or whatever he said. But wicked. I don't know how many times they could have said hero for hire in this episode. So talk about shove it down your throat. But yeah, wicked. I like the fact that Luke was telling Foggy that he met Method Man last season, and Foggy telling Luke that, he's a hip hop head and he knows a bit about hip hop. So it's always good to see Foggy and, his opinion on stuff that you wouldn't really put Foggy in that kind of bracket, would you? But we shouldn't judge. But loving the Misty Knight having to deal with the fact that, is she going to do what she's done, taking the evidence? Is she going to do something that doesn't really seem like something that she'd do? I'm not a comic book fan, as in I didn't read them as a kid religiously like you guys, but I've learned a lot from you guys, and I gather the fact that she wouldn't ever think about framing someone by putting evidence in a crime scene. So that's very, very strange. But yeah, let's see. I'm going to get off and I'm going to get onto episode 7. Or 6, sorry. So yeah, see you guys soon. And just so you know, one of you asked, what does Wagwan mean? I think Mariah said it a couple of episodes ago. Wagwan means what's happening. It's just like saying, how you doing, mate, when you walk into a room. So, all right, guys, take care.
Thank you, Ryan. That's some great feedback. Wagwan.
What's happening? Nice. Excellent, Ryan.
Yeah,
Thank
great.
you so much for that.
Thank you, Ryan. Yeah.
And yeah, we absolutely loved Piranha the Superfan. May he rest in peace, or in a piranha tank.
Yes.
Or little
Poor
pieces
thing.
within
Little
piranhas.
pieces. That's it. Yeah, Foggy the hip hop fan. Absolute great moments. As I said, just those looks from Luke Cage at him when he's saying it, as if, I don't care, just don't tell me about it. Really good stuff.
Yeah, really, as well with Misty Knight, that kind of dilemma that she's in that moment, and also about her past actions as well, with Scarf, having seen him potentially plant evidence, or in fact knowing that he did that, but also went along with it for maybe some kind of greater good, or because her suspicions or intuitions, like we have seen in this episode, that she knows the people that he's doing it to are actually guilty. And maybe she sees it as a shortcut to getting the justice that she intuitively knows through kind of her own superpower. So yeah, really interesting stuff.
Yeah. Well, Ryan obviously did go straight on to episode 6, because we've also got some voicemail feedback on episode 6 as well.
What's up, guys? Ryan here with my episode 6 quick review. There's a lot of decent conversations in this, which we took a lot from. We had Bushmaster and his uncle saying how, he's dragging the Jamaican name through the mud with all the crimes that he's committing. Everyone will start to assume that all Jamaicans are the same. You've got Mariah and the police chief talking about, they used to obviously date when they were in school, and Misty watching that and thinking, what's going on here? You've got Luke and Piranha talking about, daddy issues, so to speak. So there's a lot of stuff that got kind of aired out here. And then obviously we finish it off with the fight on the bridge, which was really good. But I got to admit, I did think the line of the I'm paralyzed was a bit funny, but it's all good. But the main thing is that we're watching Mitzi. I agree with you guys, sorry. She definitely held back on what she was going to do when she was thinking about planting that evidence. She definitely decided not to pursue framing Cockroach. And then she did lie to her chief by saying, I was planning to do it, because you clearly see her put the bullet back in the bag and back in her pocket, and then see the trail of blood. So, yeah, that's a bit awkward, but we'll see what happens with Misty and the rest of the force. But yeah, take care, guys. See you soon.
Thank you so much, Ryan. I completely disagree with you. I love your feedback, except for that one part where you go against me. I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying you're wrong.
He was only using his eyes, Chris.
Oh, yeah.
He actually watched the show, Chris.
That's it.
Rather than skim watched it.
Oh, yeah. Because, look, it's 13 episodes. We're watching it at a very slow pace. I have to skim watch it. I'm sorry.
You fast forward it to make it faster.
Yeah, exactly.
More impactful. Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan, for the feedback again. Yeah, I really enjoyed that moment between Anansi and Bushmaster, and that real kind of social take about, the community, the names of Jamaicans in New York being pulled through the mud because of Bushmaster's actions. It's a really interesting take, I think. Again, the one-to-one with Piranha and Luke Cage on the whole daddy issues, really, really good. I love Piranha from these last 2 episodes, and I still do. It really is a shame that he became fish food in that sense. But still, I think he played a really good part in getting Luke Cage to see what ultimately, I suppose, Claire Temple couldn't in that moment. But it may have required Claire Temple's that jolt of her leaving for him to be more receptive to those. So, again, really nice feedback. So thank you.
Absolutely. Keep sending them in. If you want to send in any of your thoughts about any of the episodes so far this season or any of the future episodes, you can go over and send a voicemail to us through our website at defenderstvpodcast.com or leave some feedback over in our Facebook group, as John mentioned. Like Mike, who's also talking about episode 6, he said, to this point, season 2 has been a bit of a slow burn for me, but this episode really turned things up. I started this episode only with the plan to watch this episode and only this one, and it's taking every little bit of self-control I have not to stay up and watch episode 7. I think we said this is probably the biggest cliffhanger that was in an episode as Luke got kicked off that bridge into the river. That's not the Hudson.
It most certainly isn't the Hudson. Neither is it the Nile or the Amazon.
Exactly. So I'm sure you held back, Mike, but thanks so much for sending your feedback on episode 6.
Yeah, hopefully, though, at this stage, Mike, you have rocketed onto episode 7. So yeah,
and at this stage, episode 8, because we've just done our episode 8 spoiler-filled podcast. If you're listening this far,
true. So thank you so much for the feedback. Bob Phillips, again on Facebook, talks about episode 7 and says, what an episode. From the very fourth wall breaking, it's my show, to the proper heroic burning building. This both wrapped and seeded storylines. I love the way Misty is stepping into her own, and a little sad Comanche is ended. Lots of hope still that the Rev is going to come up a goodie, which means he almost certainly is not going to. Yeah, I'm a little sad that Comanche has gone the way of the bullet two bullets through the chest, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, what's old Revy Lucas gonna do? Good, bad, or simply a clergyman?
Yeah, possibly. We're still not sure. Everybody's up in the air at the moment. We don't know where anybody is. He does seem to be pretty good at the moment, though.
Yep.
Bob also finished with, also, Rastlat. Lots of me doesn't want to know what that means yet, as I'm certain the explaining will be a little twinkle of comic in an upcoming episode, surrounded by doom, I'm guessing. Finally, no Samwise Gamgee required for Power Man to rescue himself from the river. Good old Luke.
Yes, I think he used the Force, somewhat like Princess Leia. He floated on to safety.
Possibly. Rastlat, this will have no bearing on the show at all, so I suggest you do what I did and search it on the Urban Dictionary, and it will tell you what it is. Otherwise, I'd be using my swear jar quite a lot.
Yes, but it certainly is a derogatory term.
It is, yes. Definitely.
And wrapping up our feedback, we have an email from Chamiz. Hello, Chamiz here from Savannah, Georgia. Luke's birthplace, yay me. Congratulations, Chamiz.
Very cool.
I've been listening to your podcast for quite a few seasons, but I've never left a message for some reason. Anywho, just writing in to let you know that I really enjoy your podcast. It's one of the podcasts that keep me going while at work. I'm a marathoner when it comes to these shows, so it tickles me to hear all your theories you all come up with. Thank you. I'm glad I provide enjoyment. Ha, Derek. There you go. See?
Chris must be your favourite, Chamiz.
Yeah, I'm just going to put it out there. Look, the amount of theories I come up with, I'm at least the champ right now because the guys don't even get in part of the game.
I do loads of theories too, just none of them come right.
Okay, that's true. So Derek doesn't join the game and I just whoop John's ass.
There you go.
Sometimes.
Go moving swiftly on. Chamiz continued. I feel as if this episode does a good job of both building up the antagonists and creating a pathway for them to evolve. Mariah has hit rock bottom, so now we wait to see if she will rise to the occasion or if she will wallow. Bushmaster has become extremely overconfident. Perhaps he feels he has earned it, but as you all noted, he keeps making mistakes. Keeping Piranha as a hostage would have made more sense legally. I do suppose he expected Mariah to die in the fire, leaving no one to contest his newly gained riches. Too bad for him he didn't finish off Luke properly. I'd say he has now become the man on the hill. He really should look out for people who are aiming for his crown. And poor Shades. It's odd for me because Shades is very sinister. I don't like him very much as a person, but he is a villain. So good job, writers. Still, out of all the antagonists in the show, first season included, he is the biggest bastard by far. Very serpent-like, despite not getting a snake's name. I get the impression that he's always plotting while waiting for opportunities to strike. I'd say the extra gunshot was about all one could expect from Shades in the moment. I dare to say that it was all that he could do to keep it together, and that shot was him losing his cool. But I'll stop now before I enter spoiler town. Finally, Shamise went on to say, absolutely adored seeing Misty fight with her new arm. She's one of my favourite Marvel characters, and I've always felt the comics never did her justice. I'm dying for a Daughters of the Dragon TV show. Marvel's done a bit better greenlighting projects featuring underrepresented groups in recent years. Maybe if ratings stay decent in Netflix shows, they would take a chance with Missy and Colleen, with some Claire Temple as White Tiger on the side.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Shamise.
Yeah,
Loving
very
it.
good.
Yeah, loving it. I think you're absolutely right. I think there's entirely a possibility we'll see a Misty and Colleen show spinning off in the future. We've seen some great moments with them in this show, and we jump at the chance to watch it and talk about it on a podcast. Love it.
Yes, more content for us to podcast about is always a good thing, and it will actually be a good show.
Absolutely. And Shamise, if you ever feel like writing in again and sending us any further thoughts on any of the future episodes, please do so, because some of your thoughts are fantastic. I absolutely love your point about Shades. Maybe it's only that one extra gunshot that he's able to get off. That does explain something we were talking about in that episode, guys. Saying that Shades possibly couldn't get over it because he was too emotional. It's pretty much what we see in this episode. So that's pretty cool. Nice call out there. And also the fact that Bushmaster kills Piranha and then is going to kill Mariah and just expects that because of his confidence that Mariah will die and he won't have anybody to contest the club makes loads of sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Good spot, Shamise, and thank you for the feedback. I also really like your comment that, you know, Bushmaster is getting overconfident. He now needs to start looking down the hill at those people coming up at him in the same way that he did against Mariah Dillard. Or should I say Stokes? Yeah, thank you so much, Shamise, for your feedback. Also, thank you to everyone else who has left feedback either through voicemail, on our Facebook group, or through the website. It is really good to get your thoughts, and please keep on sending in your thoughts, comments, or discussion points for the remaining episodes of Luke Cage Season 2. And not only that, but remember to share the love by sharing the podcast. You can subscribe, rate us, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or any other good podcast catcher. Just search for Defenders TV Podcast and subscribe on your favorite app.
Yes, and we don't ask for this much, but if you do enjoy our show, guys, please go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a review and a couple of stars, because you know what? It just gets the word out there to tell more people about our little show here in our little group where we're all fellow defenders. And on that note, gentlemen, we'll be back with our review of Luke Cage Season 2, Episode 9, for Pete's sake, next Tuesday. And in the immortal words of Luke Cage, sweet Christmas. I know it's only July, but sweet Christmas.
Yeah, sweet summer. Hot and sticky.
Yes, thanks so much for joining us, fellow defenders. We'll talk to you again next time.
Yeah, as always, thank you so much for listening. It has been an absolute pleasure. I'm off to see Babylon's Finest, and after that, we will speak with you again next time. Bye.
You think I'm holding back?